so hello everybody, welcome back to Learn English with B. And today we are going to be discussing comparative graphs for IELTS writing task 1 academic purpose. Right, so for the comparative graph, the data can be in the form of pie chart, tables, or bar graph. Right, with only one time given or no time given at all. Right, if you get either pie chart or table or bar graph with more than time period, so you are going to be using the concept of graphic with trend, which I've discussed it earlier on this channel, so you might as well check that video. Right, alright, so let's discuss the comparative graph. So after analyzing that the data that we get is comparative graph, so the next thing that we need to consider is the thing we need to prepare. The first, we need to know the concept of degree of comparison, and then describing numbers or percentage, and then ranking. Okay, so now for the degree of comparison, there are 3 degrees. The first is positive or konsep setara, and then the second one is the concept of comparative or konsep lebih dari or kurang dari, and then the last one is superlative, yang paling. Okay, let's discuss from the first, concept setara. Okay, here the concept of positive is simply using as, adjective, and as. For instance, as big as, sebesar, and then as high as, setinggi. And then we can also make it into negative sentence by putting not before as, adjective as. For instance, not as big as, tidak sebesar, or not as high as, tidak setinggi. Okay, and then for the positive degree of comparison, here is the example. The number of people who dislike the entertainment available in Bowen Island is not as high as those who do not enjoy the living coast, at 25% and 50% respectively. Okay, here you can have a look, not as high as, tidak setinggi, because those who dislike entertainment available only 25%, and those who do not enjoy the living coast is 50%. So 20% and 50%, not as high as. Well, besides using simply as, blah 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 as, or as adjective as, we can modify the positive degree of comparison by using almost as, blah 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 as, hampir se, and then nearly as, blah 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 as. Ini juga hampir atau mendekati se. Almost as high as, hampir setinggi. Tidak setinggi tapi hampir. It means angkanya hampir sama. The same case here also can be used for nearly as blah 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 as, nearly as big as, nearly as crowded as, hampir seramai, hampir sebesar. Okay? And then now we can also use a positive degree of comparison if the difference is big or huge. Ketika perbedaannya cukup besar pun, kita masih bisa menggunakan degree of comparison yang positif dengan menggunakan nowhere near as blah 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 as. Nowhere near as high as, ini sebenarnya tidak setinggi, jaraknya banyak gitu. Nowhere near as high as. Okay? Not quite as blah 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 as. Okay, jadi tidak sekedar as blah 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 as or not as blah 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 as. Now you can use this concept. Okay, and the example, you can check this out. Right, now let's move on to the discussion of comparative. Comparative means lebih, blah 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 daripada, or kurang, blah blah daripada. Okay, and then this one is the concept. Different from positive, for comparative degree of comparison, there are 2 concepts. It depends on the syllables, tergantung suku katanya. Okay? if the adjective consists of one syllables, we just simply put er. Ini artinya sudah lebih. For instance, low plus er, lower, lebih rendah. Higher, lebih tinggi. Jadi er ini sudah berarti lebih. So you don't have to write more, lower, for instance. Karena er di sini sudah berarti lebih. Okay? And then now for the 3-syllabic words, we need more plus adjective. More means lebih. Okay, for 3-syllabic words. For instance, more popular, lebih populer. More interesting, lebih menarik. Okay, and here is the example I took for more interesting. Tourists visiting Bowen Island state that cultures are more interesting than food, contributing at 40% and 35% respectively. Well, what about with the 2-syllabic adjectives? So let's discuss it. For 2-syllabic words or 2-syllabic adjectives, we need a different kind of treatment. So if the adjective has y or ow or er endings, so the concept of the comparative is the same as those adjectives with 1-syllabic word, okay, or 1-syllabic adjectives. So for instance, busy, why? Busy, busier. Narrow, narrower. And then clever, cleverer. And then for other endings, except for this, obviously, so we use the comparative concept following the 3-syllabic adjectives. For instance, special, more special. Crowded, more crowded. And then famous, more famous. And here is the example. Tokyo is more crowded than Kyoto. Crowded, 2-syllabic adjectives. Well, for the degree of comparison comparative, we can also put modification. So not only saying that, let's say Tokyo is more crowded than Kyoto, or Jakarta is more popular than other city in Indonesia, we can also use the modifiers such as much, a lot, far, considerably, relatively, or slightly. However, it depends on the differences. Okay, so if, for instance, the number has big gaps or big differences, then we can use far, much, or a lot. For instance, much bigger, far bigger, or a lot bigger. We can also use much more crowded, a lot more crowded, and far more crowded. Jauh lebih besar or jauh lebih padat. Alright, and then for the small differences, then we can use considerably, slightly, or relatively. Agak, yeah, actually we can say agak. So we can say considerably more crowded, relatively more crowded, or slightly more crowded. Jadi agak lebih padat. Jadi the gap or the difference is not really that big. Okay, and here is the example. As you can see on the bar graph, okay, so here is the sentence. New migrants born in English-speaking countries who visit library account for 40%, meaning that it is relatively higher than visitor born in Canada with just below 40%. I used relatively higher sedikit lebih tinggi. Okay, because the gap is 40% and just below 40%. It's not big differences. Okay. Okay, so the last discussion for degree of comparison is superlative. This is the highest degree, or yang paling. Okay, to say yang paling in English, again, it depends on the syllables. For one syllabic adjectives, we just simply put the and then adjective est. For instance, high, higher, the highest. Okay, so here the highest. Okay, it's a must to put the. Right, and then the other example is big, bigger, and the biggest. For example, blue whale is the biggest animal. Okay, now for the three syllabic adjectives or more, then we use the concept of the most. For instance, popular, more popular, and the most popular. And then populous, more populous, and the most populous. For instance, Jakarta is the most populous region in Indonesia. Alright, so those are the discussion of degree of comparisons. For the other discussion to prepare writing task 1 for comparative graph, I'm going to discuss it later on. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all for the degree of comparison, and see you.